education. And in 1983, their report comes out. For the most part, the schools fail miserably.
The nation was shocked.
The report states bluntly that the very future of our nation is at risk.
The idea that there was a rising tide of mediocrity was something that really captured the imagination of the American public, of the press.
It was full of apocalyptic language, and so it made for a great news story. We had a wonderful time reporting it.
They certainly had no idea that the risk was the school. They were thinking about nuclear weapons and bombs and all of that sort of thing.
So this was really an open letter to the American people. That's the report. That's how small it is. It's only 36 pages.
So President Reagan comes in and the economy is not doing well. We have mortgage rates are really high. We have long lines at the gas pumps.
The budget plan I submit to you on February 8th will realize major savings by dismantling the departments of energy and education.
Ronald Reagan appoints Terrell Bell as his first Secretary of Education.
Advocates of more and more government interference in education have had ample time to make their case, and they've failed.
Which is a tough job, given that President Reagan had talked about wanting to publicly abolish the Department of Education.
Open a newspaper these days. You will read that our schools are handing out diplomas to kids who are nearly illiterate.
The other political reality was that a lot of Republicans thought that American schools were in terrible shape.
Students are performing not as well on standardized tests as their parents did 20 years ago.
Terrell Bell did not share this sentiment. He thought that basically Americans' education, while it had some problems, was in fairly good shape. So he figured that if he could appoint a prestigious blue ribbon commission, they would come in and say that U.S. education is actually in fairly good shape.
I received a call from Secretary of Education Ted Bell in 1981 and asked if I would serve as chairman of the National Commission on Excellence in Education. I laid down certain conditions. The first condition was that the report would be published, whether Secretary Bell liked it or not, and whether President Reagan liked it or not. He agreed to arrange to that.
I think one of the things that he expected was that this commission was going to say, hey, America's not doing so bad. Actually paint kind of a rosy picture of what was going on in America educationally.
And so we met for the first time in the office of our President Reagan.
The president was very clear. He essentially believed that the schools were the responsibility of the states and not the federal government. His advisors were supporting him in that position.
He asked each of us to tell one question to him. What I had to say to him was, there are pictures of past presidents in this room. When people talk to your picture, they will say, he really did great things for American education. Well, he smiled at me and asked the next one to talk.
Well, these were 18 people who had very different views, but there was a common commitment to identify the problems that K-12 had.
This was 18 months of work. We'd had 40 meetings all across the country.
We pursued what are students studying? How is the performance measured? What's the condition of the teaching profession? What is the adequacy of funding from the states?
It was a terribly difficult thing to be doing.
We concluded that the condition of American education, K through 12, had deteriorated badly in the previous 25 years. Now, the person who wrote the first draft was Professor Gerald Holton from Harvard.
There came to me the idea that this is a report not just to the American people, but to the president, to change his mind. And therefore, it has to be a powerful one. And so I put in this rather famous remark that if a foreign country had imposed this miserable educational system on us, we would have perhaps declared war on them. After all, he's in charge of declaring war.
We submitted it to Bell. He didn't see it. That's the first time he ever saw the report. And he said, this report's going to change the country. I'm going to do everything I can in my power to persuade the president to get back of it.
Secretary Bell really kind of went out and was pushing. I mean, the report that was produced was not a rosy picture of what was going on in America educationally at all.
So this was a very important day. The commission acted officially to submit it. It had been published. It was out.
President of the United States.
The East Rim of the White House was packed with people, and he gave a really nice speech.
Well, today, you've issued your report.
And he said, I congratulate you, because in it has exactly what I asked you to do.
So we'll continue to work in the months ahead for passage of tuition tax credits, voluntary school prayer, and abolishing the Department of Education.
None of that was in our report. We were all dismayed. Jerry Holton was sitting in the front row, and I heard him groan.
The number of us sitting there in front of him were thunderstruck. W.O. Baker said loud enough to be heard in back where the reporters were. He said, "We have been had."
It was a great story. From a news point of view, it was definitely an above-the-fold story.
But the press loved the report far beyond any of our expectations.
The commission discovered something that borders on a disaster.
It was full of apocalyptic language. It was a blatantly political document, and so it made for a great news story.
And the total printing, I'm told, by the Department of Education came to 6 million copies.
Excellence is going to cost. And I think the only way that that can be understood is to appreciate that mediocrity is going to cost far more.
People advising the president were not friendly to this report.
13% of America's 17-year-olds are functionally illiterate.
They thought we were exaggerating the situation when we were in fact not exaggerating it.
And we teach the average kid in the United States 1 to 2 years of mathematics. Japan has 6 years of math. Russia has 7.5 years of math.
We were paying a price for that, and the price that we would pay in the long run would be disastrous.
Polls began showing that the report had resonated with the American public.
And the press had proceeded to excoriate the president for several days.
And so the White House picked up on this. At that point, President Reagan decided that perhaps education is a viable political issue.
I had a call from the White House, it was about maybe 3 weeks or something, after the report was out, asking if I could travel with the president on Air Force One. We got on Air Force One. He said, "I'm afraid I misspoke when I accepted it. I'd like to know the answers to the following questions." We went through every question he had in his own handwriting, by the way. At the end of it, he said, "I like this report. I'm going to go sell it with you." That was it. He went all around the United States with Bell.
Welcome to our panel, and we'd like to begin by inviting you, if you would, to make a few opening remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary.
The irony is that Secretary Bell discovered what the inside of the Air Force One looked like.
People across the country took note. I took note as a governor of North Carolina. As soon as A Nation at Risk came out, we produced our report shortly thereafter entitled A Nation Prepared.
The last time education was the focus of such intense public debate was during the 1950s. This nation then was shaken when the Soviets launched their Sputnik. We responded by making math, science, and engineering education a priority.
The big achievement of Nation at Risk was to make educational quality something that was at the center of national discussions.
I believe the Commission's report has shaken the nation as well, and we need shaking.
The legacy of Nation at Risk is that it is the beginning of the modern education reform movement.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, for your interest in boosting education.
And thus did Ted Bell become the father of school reform.